sometimes there's only so much you can do with your mainline numbered series of games. So, it's always nice when your favourite franchise's world gets expanded by spinning off into other genres, or maybe just giving lesser known characters their time to shine. Sometimes, you gotta say it really works, and other times, well, it just doesn't. And yeah, sure, taking beloved characters and sticking them into a kart racer or sports game is an easy win. But we want to ignore the more obvious titles today and instead just highlight our favourite spin-off games that we think every one of you must experience.
I need this to survive.
The Oddworld games have always been a little bit, well, odd. Yeah, odd. I mean, just look at the protagonist Abe. He is so far removed from the cute and colourful characters that were headlining games around the same time. Yet, thanks to the game's charm and addictive puzzle-based gameplay, the series became a massive hit.
Hello.
Well, the oddness didn't stop there, as out of all things this series could have done with its world, the devs decided to give us the 3D action platformer first-person shooter hybrid spin-off known as Oddworld Strangers FF, and if you haven't already, well, this one's a must-play.
Well, that's good to know.
The first reason this game stands out is for its weird aesthetic and art style that absolutely brim with charm and creativity. The world may be odd, but is strikingly beautiful and extremely well presented at the same time. As you traverse this strange land, you'll really find it hard not to just stop and admire all the small eccentric details and love that's been poured into making the game's world truly unforgettable. To explore this dangerous world, you're thrown into the leather boots of the extremely likeable bounty hunter known as Stranger, who has to hunt down criminals in order to get enough money for an unexplained life-saving surgery he so desperately needs. That's kinda all I can tell you, as the story here is also ridiculously strong and heightened by some extremely charming, funny and quirky characters that you'll instantly fall in love with. Gameplay hasn't aged all that well, but is still a fun solid mashup of third-person exploring, combat, platforming, puzzle solving, all combined with first-person shooting action. The twist though is that you're not unloading standard rounds into your enemies, but instead you attach and shoot little critters from your trusty crossbow. Yeah, that's right, ammo here is made up of living, breathing creatures that all have their own defining abilities to help you do maximum damage. It's another unique feature that not only helps the game to stand out, but also adds a little strategic flair to the combat. Stranger's Wrath, to me, is one of the finest hidden gems to ever grace the world, and I highly suggest you pick it up.
Lock and load, boys. We got some hunting to do.
We are at war, and not the one we were expecting. Our combined military forces have been routed. The comms have gone dark. The red phone will not be ringing.
Funnily enough, people who drink as much as I do have a tendency to kill off quite a few brain cells in the process, which in turn means we're not the most effective at battlefield strategies. So it's nice when developers turn what is generally a more thinking man's game into a hammy third-person shooter injected with some ever so light tactical strategy elements, so that even the most dim-witted of us can enjoy their franchise's world. And that's exactly what we got with the Bureau XCOM Declassified, a third-person cover shooter combined with the campy extraterrestrial shenanigans of the XCOM series. The game largely flew under the radar upon release, but if you do stumble across this one out in the wild, I highly suggest you pick it up, as its unique theme, setting and B-movie tone just enhance the risk-reward gameplay and bombastically silly narrative into a truly unique little gem. This prequel to the mainline series, set in the 1960s, sees you jumping into the very polished shoes of an agent of the Bureau as he investigates and tries to thwart a deadly invasion. Yeah, it's all a bit dumb, but that's kinda part of the charm of this one. It's kinda like a 60s Mass Effect with all the dialogue choices, permadeath, devastating weaponry, and abilities you could ask for. I mean, it even has multiple endings. The game absolutely oozes atmosphere too, and is just a perfect slice of cheesy sci-fi fun you really shouldn't miss.
Again, the fate of our world is at hand. But this time, There will be no tournament. This time, you must take the fight out of the arena and defeat these enemies in their realm.
Mortal Kombat's popularity is just as high as it ever was, yet its first two attempts to branch its stories and characters off into other genres didn't really go to plan. Yeah, of course, I'm talking about Special Forces and Mythologies, two games that royally pooped the bed.
I did not poop the bed!
However, in 2015, the demigods at Midway, with the help of the team that made the excellent Mutant Academy games, gifted the world with Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks, a game so bloody good, it's honestly up there with the best the mainline series has ever given us. This third-person action-adventure beat-em-up is absolute fire, especially when you involve a co-op buddy. The game sees you take control of Liu Kang and Kung Lao and punch, kick, and basically just murder all in your way to complete your goal. There is a story tying all this together, but it really isn't worth mentioning as, well, it's just your standard MK nonsense you know and love. And kinda just basically retells the events of MK2. You know, silly over the top end of the world stuff. Yet, why the game shines and makes this list is thanks to Shaolin Monks' all out brutal and bloody gameplay that's as challenging as it is super fluid fun. Just think God of War with an Outworld lick of paint. Projectiles, long combos, XP, leveling up, unlockable moves, fatalities, and even some light puzzle solving, which basically just boils down to more murder. It's all here, and it's all glorious in its execution, with the boss fights being a true standout. And lastly, I've also got to mention that as a huge fan of the series, it's so great to see the classic but loved stages that we grew up with from the mainline series transformed into fully explorable locales. So get a friend, get some cold ones, and just enjoy this slice of old school Mortal Kombat nostalgia.
Journey far beyond the walls of the arena into a legendary world of action and adventure. Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks, rated M for mature.
While we are on the topic of spin-off games based on popular fighting franchises, let's talk about the incredibly overlooked Dreamcast title known as Cannon Spike, a super arcadey, top-down, multi-directional shooter in the vein of Smash TV or Total Carnage that stars Street Fighter's Cammy and Charlie Nash as the main characters. Yes, that's right, a whole game dedicated to staring at Cammy's bubble butt. Surely that's enough to sell you on this one, right?
There was a ghost! There's ectoplasm!
Lusting over polygons aside, Cannon Spike is a frantic blast to play through. Sure, it's simple to pick up and easy to get to grips with, but this game will truly put your wit, reactions, and skill to the test. Every encounter has a nice layer of strategy to them, as you must prioritize certain enemies over others to ensure victory.
Cammy wins!
The mishmash of melee and gunplay combat present here somehow just feels extremely impactful and responsive at the same time, meaning if you ever fail, it never feels cheap or unjust, which in turn means the game has that one more go factor down to a T that will have you playing for hours, even if the game is a tad short. This insanely addictive, hellishly challenging title also boasts co-op play too, so if things do get a little bit too difficult, you can just call a mate over to help you out. But I've also got to warn you that this game is hella pricey to pick up.
According to Aztec myth, the region we call the Yucatan is an ancient battleground where the human followers of Totec, the Guardian of Light, once waged a catastrophic war against the demonic forces of Zolot, the Keeper of Darkness.
In all honesty, I've never been the biggest Tomb Raider fan. I grew up a Nintendo child, and when I tried out the 2013 reboot, I wasn't all that impressed.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
However, one thing I do love is the Xbox Live Marketplace, which in turn led me to purchase Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light, a co-op adventure you're really not going to want to miss. Guardian strips back the viewpoint of the player to a more isometric angle, for better or maybe for worse if you're a polygon perv, yet it still retains the grand scale, dual-wielding gunplay, and puzzle solving the series is celebrated for. This more arcade approach to the raiding of tombs really does just fit like a glove. Not only is the game drop dead gorgeous, but the action and spectacle has also been ramped up to fit this new approach. While the single player is a whole lot of fun, the best way to experience this adventure is with a co-op buddy, as working together to overcome all the traps, hurdles, and smartly implemented puzzles is immensely satisfying and never gets old. And I gotta say, while it may put some newer fans off, I really did appreciate the cheesy, mythological driven narrative and the seriously stupid enemy variety.
Now I will bathe in your blood.
A country plagued with civil war entrusts its fate and the life of its leader to a man reborn as a machine.
Remember when old Kojima pulled off gaming's greatest bait and switch in Metal Gear Solid 2 with the now infamous protagonist switch? Yup, instead of playing as the iconic Solid Snake, we got to run around naked as Raiden. Sneaky stuff indeed, eh? Well, in 2013, Raiden would be back in his very own title known as Metal Gear Rising: Revengance, a spin-off that sliced through everyone's expectations of what a Metal Gear game could be, while still retaining the heart of what made the series as popular as it is. Firstly, the game is just gleefully over the top, absurd, and a true action spectacle unlike anything you're likely to play with high octane, free flowing, slicing and dicing combat, the game's bread and butter. Which, thanks to Platinum Games' pedigree when it comes to this style of game, is masterfully implemented and an absolute joy to get to grips with. Trust me, the combat in this game is second to none. Combine this with the excellent blade mode mechanic, which lets you quite literally cut everything in your way into teeny tiny pieces, some incredible boss fights, a heart-pumping score, and an absurd plot, and you have one of the finest action titles that never truly got his time to shine.
I told myself this was about justice, about protecting the weak, but I was wrong.
I'm gonna give a quick shout out to a spin-off series that really did surprise me when I played it, and that's the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games. A series of spin-offs that removes the pesky slave traders, also known as humans, and just lets you play as your favourite mons in some light-hearted dungeon crawling good times. The game may not be all that deep mechanically, but I have to shout out this series of games for their visually captivating presentation, charm, humour, and story. Sure, the roguelike gameplay is enjoyable, but the incredibly touching narrative and character building make this a Pokemon tale like no other. If you don't believe me, trust me, just check it out.
Hull integrity 18%. Oxygen depletion imminent. Abandoned ship.
Porting over the eerie and bloody halls of the Ishimura and Dead Space haunting dismemberment gameplay over to Nintendo's Waggle system was never going to be a real possibility due to the system's limitations. So instead, the team at Visceral gave Wii owners a spin-off title in the form of an on-rail light gun-esque shooter. It probably shouldn't have worked as well as it did, but I for one am glad, as Dead Space Extraction is a limb-dismembering, bloody good time that effortlessly captures the look, tone, and grotesque dread of the mainline series while also smartly expanding the Dead Space lore at the same time. All this and the ability to play couch co-op make Dead Space Extraction not only a worthy addition to the franchise, but also one of the best rail shooters on the system. And lastly on our list is another spin-off that dumbs itself down for those of us who like our games a little less taxing on the old noggin and a little more action-packed. And that's exactly what we got when Creative Assembly teamed up with Sega and decided to make a 3D hack-and-slasher spin-off based on its Total War series. Yep, I'm talking about Spartan Total Warrior, a game that mixes the epic, visceral combat of the God of War series with the overwhelming number of enemies that you'd get from a Dynasty Warriors title. Unlike the mainline series that strives for historical accuracy, Total Warrior fuses in Greek and Roman mythology to tell an epic, albeit silly tale to sink our teeth into. which in turn gives us gamers a varied selection of uniquely designed cannon fodder, begging to taste the cold steel of our blades. And I gotta say, surprisingly, the game has barely aged at all and still looks great, runs smoothly, and the combat still holds up nicely with some well implemented strategy and RPG elements, making the game far more than just your average hack and slash button masher. Right, that's just my personal favourite spin-off titles I highly suggest you need to check out, but let me know yours down in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that other nonsense, but most importantly, as always, you guys stay tipsy.